Hello everyone, and I am so sorry. I'm sorry. I am so sorry for the major delay with this video. I've no idea why I left it this long. I mean, it didn't feel like it, but it's actually a month since the previous video, so I'm sorry. Yeah, so welcome to this fourth Bond reflection. The reflection on Timothy Dalton, the fourth actor to play James Bond in the official series, who only appeared in two films in the series, The Living Daylights and License to Kill. Excuse me. I should have left this as an outtake. Oh, sorry about that. Anyway, so Timothy Dalton. Let's get rolling. And as usual, Jack McCullough will appear in his segment later on. Oh, wait till the Brosnan one. Timothy Dalton. I'm not going to lie. When I first watched Dalton's Bond movies, when I got the Blu-ray box set, like a year ago, or almost 2 years ago, actually, year and a half ago, I didn't particularly like him that much. I mean, I didn't think he was terrible. He just didn't really grow on me. I mean, my dad doesn't particularly like Dalton. He finds him too posh, which I kind of understand. You know, he's just kind of does have that, you know, very well-spoken accent. You know, he's not the first choice you'd think for James Bond, but and it was definitely a challenge for him, and you could see that. But I think as I've watched, you know, The Living Daylights and License to Kill a bit more, sort of realised this guy is great. You know, Timothy Dalton's a great Bond. I think he's very underrated. I mean, some people really tend to overlook Dalton. I think because Roger Moore had stayed for 12 years, and people were so used to the kind of campy Bond. I mean, I don't mind campy Bond. I mean, yes, Roger Moore had his serious moments, but he never had a whole film where he was very serious throughout. Like, he always had the charm. You know, he was the most charming of all the Bonds, and I'm glad he stuck to that. I'm glad he didn't divert too much from his style. I just mean that the quality of his films were kind of similar. Like, they were very kind of, they weren't very camp. They were camp, but they were also, he had his tough moments, but I don't think he was completely tough. Like, he had a couple of cold kills. Dalton, this guy's a badass. Like, you can see that this is definitely, The Living Daylights was definitely a breath of fresh air for the franchise, because after A View to a Kill, some people thought, oh, Roger Moore's far too old, you know, which I could kind of understand, although I think people were exaggerating about that. At least they made a joke out of it, the fact that he was old. But Dalton, I think he's fine. He's the perfect age, and he looks really intense, and that really helps him. Because, I mean, let's face it, if you had a Bond actor who couldn't go intense, then what's the point? I mean, yeah, Roger Moore had his intense moments. Like, all the actors have their intense moments, apart from Lazenby, and possibly Brosnan. But no, staying on track with Timothy Dalton. Timothy Dalton, you know, you can tell that Dalton, I mean, he had so much potential with the role, and I think he really delivered in his two movies that he had. I mean, I feel sorry for the guy, because he only got two movies. I mean, after License to Kill, the series had a 6-year hiatus, so the series could have well ended after License to Kill, and not sort of been continued in Brosnan in the 90s. Then, you know, we wouldn't even have had Craig, so, you know. But no, The Living Daylights, I think, is a true classic spy thriller, and it's a classic Bond movie. It's one of the best, I think, and it's definitely Dalton's best Bond film. I mean, you can tell Dalton just lands himself in there. Like, there are scenes that are just timeless, like where Dalton interrogates Pushkin, and he's like, if I trusted Koskov, you and I wouldn't be talking. And, you know, Dalton is really good in the action scenes. You know, the guy throws himself in there, and what is good about Timothy Dalton is also that he has gone back to the roots of Bond. You know, he has gone back to the source material more than any of the previous ones, more than Connery, Lazenby, and Moore. You know, he's actually, Dalton has approached this with an analytical eye and saying, I need to do right by the source material, and he did, and he really did the role justice. And it's just a shame that he was cast at the time when, you know, things. I mean, The Living Daylights was great. I mean, things could have gone really well, but I think License to Kill was such a. It was a bit of a step down. I'm not going to lie, but it was a good movie. I liked License to Kill. I mean, the only problem is it was a bit weird. Like, there's fucking ninjas. Like, what the hell? And I mean, I didn't mind the plot. I liked the idea of Bond going rogue. This was a new direction that John Glenn wanted to take the series in, and I can appreciate that. But the movie was really weird, and bloody fish. Like, seriously. I mean, there are some. I mean, Dalton is a very serious Bond, and I like that. I mean, I think he's more serious in License to Kill because he's sort of, the character is kind of grief-stricken over Della's death, and he's trying to do, you know, he's trying to, he's doing it for a friend. He's also trying to uncover the whole drug operation thing about Sanchez. Sanchez is I mean, the problem with the Dalton era, there are crappy villains, I'm not going to lie. I mean, Sanchez, Brad Whitaker and Koskov. Yeah, Timothy Dalton. The only problem with me, for Dalton really, the only problem I have is that he doesn't particularly do the charm as well as certain Bonds. Like, I mean, for me, Craig is the definitive Bond because he basically, I see Craig's Bond, he sort of based Timothy Dalton's version as a template for him, so he based his one off that. And then he used that to sort of drive it forward, and here he had a bit more of the charm there. And Dalton, when he tries to do the charm, he just looks too intense. I mean, I'm sorry, but I mean, you know, there's scenes with him and Cara, and you just look like, does the guy want to kill her, or does he want to like make out with her? Like, he looks like he's trying to smile, and I don't know, it looks a bit off. Like, I don't know why. It's a minor gripe, but I mean, you're like, I mean, I really like The Living Daylights. I think it's a great film. Probably the best Bond film of the 80s. I'd say so. Probably the best Bond film of the 80s. And, you know, the way that Dalton interacted with the Bond girls, well, the couple that he had to work with, it was good, you know. I mean, obviously with Cara, you know, when he was like, "Don't think, just let it happen." You know, it was a bit intense, but, you know, I don't really know if Bond and Cara fall in love. To be quite honest, I really don't know. For me, I can't really praise Dalton as much as some of the others because he hasn't done very much. I feel that, I mean, it's not his fault. I mean, had Dalton appeared in at least 2 more movies, he could have really proven himself. I think he wouldn't have been as overlooked. I mean, his movies are great in terms of the style. They're taking the sort of more gritty direction. I mean, Craig's ones are you know, blow you out of the water gritty. I mean, they're really gritty. I mean, but Dalton, people say that Dalton is the precursor to Craig, and I kind of now see why. I mean, Dalton has a lot of good moments, and, you know, I like the tanker chase and License to Kill. That's a great scene, and the final standoff with Sanchez is really cool. He was just kind of overshadowed by some of the directions by John Glenn in License to Kill, and yeah, some of the villains that were in the series. But yeah, no, I think for his small contribution, Dalton was great, and I really wish that Dalton had stayed for longer, because he was a great Bond. I think he looked the part as well. He looked really intense. Another issue, like, Dalton wasn't really that muscular, but I don't know. I guess neither was sort of Lazenby too. So I mean, Dalton, I don't know, like, yeah, he wasn't as muscular. I mean, but that's not a major problem. He had that sort of enigma. He could sort of, you know, he had his sort of moments. Like, his intensity really shows. And I mean, just look at the front of the cover here. There he is, on the end. Oh, God's sake! I'm sorry, I'm sniffing. Dalton, yeah, Timothy Dalton. It's a shame that he couldn't have stayed for longer. But you know, his two movies I think are great. I mean, I like License to Kill, but I do prefer The Living Daylights. You really get the sense that it's a new era. I couldn't imagine Roger Moore doing The Living Daylights. You just couldn't really imagine it. I mean, I think the series needed to change actors by that point. I know Jack McCullough loves Roger Moore, but even he has to admit the series probably did need a new actor for the role by that point. He had the shortest era aside Lazenby, so yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame that he didn't stay for longer, but we should be glad that we got Dalton for the time that we did, you know. And you know, he's only had 2 films, but you know, at least we can, you know, look upon them in great stead. I can understand if some people don't like Dalton, but to be honest, I think he's underrated. That's just my opinion. He's better than a couple of the other actors, I think. I have not much to say about Dalton. I'm sorry if that was a bit brief, but to be honest, he's only had 2 films, so there's not much to say. Hands down, Dalton's best scene is when he interrogates Pushkin. When he interrogates Pushkin in The Living Daylights, that's a really cool scene. And obviously the final climax as well in the plane, that's really cool. Yeah. I mean, Dalton is great. Yeah, so I have not much more to say about Timothy Dalton. I always like his films. I always like go back to them, and I always think, you know, I enjoy watching the guy. I mean, I feel sorry for him because like he only had 2 movies. I wish he could have stayed for longer, but the series went into financial issues after License to Kill. It didn't gross very much at the box office, and then I think Dalton was going to do GoldenEye, but he read the script and he turned it down, so you know, we can't really blame him for that. I don't know at what point they cast Brosnan, but it's probably in the early 90s. So yeah, that's really all I have to say about Timothy Dalton. So I'm going to hand you over to Jack McCullough, who is going to give his thoughts on Dalton. So yeah, take it away.
Thanks once again, MrTardis11. And now we come on to Timothy Dalton. Yes, Timothy Dalton. Now, as I said before, Roger Moore in The Last Reflection, he was my favourite Bond. You know, I don't think that'll ever change, to be honest. His films for me are all masterpieces, well, exception of one. And, you know, Timothy Dalton, not just for me, but I think for a lot of people, had a lot to prove after Roger Moore. And to be honest, he was great. Timothy Dalton really, I think, is a very underrated James Bond. Everybody talks about Daniel Craig and how he's the best Bond now, but I think in some ways Daniel Craig, I think maybe in quite a few ways, sort of copies Timothy Dalton. And I think Timothy Dalton is just a severely overlooked Bond. I mean, a lot of people at the time when Timothy Dalton came around, I think a lot of people, the reason why Timothy Dalton wasn't received that well is because people were sort of used to the sort of light-hearted tone of the Roger Moore films. And, you know, we had 12 years of kind of, you know, you could say campy Bonds, but, you know, quite serious, some of the films, but, I mean, Live and Let Die, but and For Your Eyes Only was quite dark. But yeah, this film, Living Daylights, it really is, for me, an underrated classic. I mean, for me, it is a masterpiece. I mean, this film really does go back to the books. It goes back to, it's probably, I'm going to say, probably the most serious Bond since From Russia with Love. Yes, that almost 25 years later. The Living Daylights is probably the most serious Bond film since that film, and this film really is, for me anyway, it's a classic. I mean, Timothy Dalton really does go back to the books, and I respect him for doing that. You know, he brought his own fresh take to James Bond. I mean, before that, James Bond was sort of played as James Bond wasn't really played serious, to be honest. I mean, Connery had his, Connery was tough, but you could sort of tell that he started to get bored, and you could sort of tell that that Connery's Bond was sort of he was sort of like exaggeration. He was an exaggeration of what an agent. He's kind of like a a super tough man, and Roger Moore the same. They were all sort of like exaggerations, kind of, and they had their tough moments. But yeah, Timothy Dalton, he really made Bond a human character. He really did, and I really respect that. And this is just great. I mean, this film for me is a masterpiece, and yeah, I'm not going to really go into the film that much. I will review it soon, but I really kind of want to stay with Dalton and Dalton's performance, because even though he did two films, and he does have one of the shortest eras of all the Bonds, I still do have quite a lot to say about Timothy Dalton. Timothy Dalton just what a great Bond. I mean, he is probably the closest to Ian Fleming's Bond. I mean, I think Desmond Llewellyn said that, and I think it's still true to this day. I mean, Craig, I have to admit, even though I love Daniel Craig, and I think he's a really great Bond, I do think he is overrated. I mean, Dalton did the sort of the tough, serious, down to earth Bond before Daniel Craig, and I think it's time that somebody kind of made that observation, and he really is overlooked. Yeah, I mean, his performance, I just love the way that he was supported. He read the books, and he really got an understanding of what Bond was, and this film is just it's just so many great moments in this film, and Dalton, he plays it seriously. He is really committed to this role. You can tell. I mean, this guy, I think, out of all the Bonds, I'm not sure, but I think he is the most. He's the Bond that has done the most stunts. I don't know if it's Daniel Craig or Timothy Dalton, but Timothy Dalton, I think maybe after Daniel Craig. Now I'm not sure, but he is. He's done the most stunts, and you could tell he's really committed to this role. I mean, the opening titles, the pre-opening title sequence where he's on the back of the truck, and that's actually him. That's actually him hanging onto the side of the truck while it's going down this mountain, and that's a big risk. I mean, imagine if he fell off. I mean, you're kind of putting your star in jeopardy here, and he was committed. You could really tell he was committed. He's really pushing the boundaries of what Bond is in this film, and this is probably the start of the modern Bond. I mean, yes, I mean, it sort of regresses, it sort of goes backwards in the Brosnan era, but I'll get to that eventually. But yes, yeah, Dalton, he's just really, really serious, on his eyes, his eyes, Dalton, you gotta admit, I mean, Daniel Craig is scary as well, but if it came down to what Bond I'd be more scared of, what Bond I would be worried chasing after me, it'd be Timothy Dalton. I mean, the guy, he's just got a really great look, and the way he squints his eyes and stuff, he really, you're kind of like, okay, you're making me feel uncomfortable, that's a good thing with Dalton. Dalton, his first film, I have to say, is his best. This film is a real spy thriller, but Dalton has some really great moments, some really good moments in this film. The best scene I'd say for him in The Living Daylights is when he's interrogating Pushkin. We never really seen something like this before. I mean, this scene is really intense. I mean, I know we have the scene with Andrea and the man with the golden gun, but this is like 10 times that. I mean, Dalton, comes in with his gun. He's really angry. he gets Gogol's, he gets Pushkin's girlfriend, rips off her clothes, basically shows her her tits to the guard to distract him, and Dalton is just you never see Sean Connery or Roger Moore doing this. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, it's kind of I know Roger Moore. I mean, maybe Sean Connery, but I don't know about Sean Connery because I think it's just a bit too rough, Sean Connery. But Dalton, he's just really serious. He throws Pushkin on the bed. He's like, if I trusted Koskov, we wouldn't be talking. He's really intense, really serious, and you really get the sense that this guy is a spy. This guy's life is on the line. He's serious. He doesn't play games. And that's what you really get with Dalton. That's what I really like about Timothy Dalton. He's just, he is probably the real life depiction of a spy. I'm going to be quite honest. I mean, yes, he does bear the ladies, but to be honest, he is probably the closest to the books. I mean, he's got the appearance, the dark hair, the tall figure, and, he is really great in the film, and he's intelligent. You really feel like Bond is a force to be reckoned with when he's interrogating Pushkin. I mean, this guy's the head of the KGB, and Bond is just interrogating him like he's a piece of dirt. And he's just really great scenes in this film, especially the fights as well are so well choreographed. And Dalton really is. He is relentless in this film. There's that scene at the end of Living Daylights where they're hanging onto the net, and I forget the name, the blonde, just basically the blonde Aryan, guy, like every James Bond henchman, the blonde henchman, hanging onto his boot, and Dalton is just, he's just so cold. The guy's just saying, please, no, and Dalton's just cutting the shoelaces off. He's just, and he just lets a guy fall, and he doesn't give a shit. I mean, I could not imagine Roger Moore or even Sean Connery doing that. And Dalton really does bring that that seriousness, that believableness to the role, and he really exceeds. And yeah, and he has a charm as well. I mean, in the Living Daylights, the scenes of him and Kara, he has the charm. He has. I mean, I'm going to be honest, he probably doesn't have as much charm as Sean Connery or Roger Moore, but he has more charm than Pierce Brosnan and George Lazenby, and maybe the same as Daniel Craig. And he really, the Living Daylights, his performance is really good. And then we come to License to Kill. Now, License to Kill, this is where he really, I'm going to say it's probably his best performance. License to Kill is where you're really scared of Bond in this film. I mean, to be honest, I think License to Kill is a payoff from On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and Dalton really brings that across. And basically the story is that Felix is going after this drug lord Sanchez, this Mexican drug lord. He manages to capture him, but Sanchez escapes, and he wants revenge. So basically they kill Della, and Felix is his legs bitten off, and it probably is probably the darkest film in the entire series. I'm gonna have to say the darkest Bond film. And Dalton, you really get the you can tell Dalton's pissed. It's quite a graphic scene when you find Della dead, and you can tell Bond is just heartbroken, and then when he gets that letter, he disagreed with something that ate him. Bond is pissed. Bond is just out in revenge in this film. He really is. He's like the Terminator in this film. He has less of the charm in this film. And that's a good thing, to be honest. I mean, if he had the charm in this film, I don't think it would have worked. And Dalton sort of ditches the charm in this film, just goes for real seriousness in this film, and that is a really good thing. Especially the scene where he finds out that Felix's buddy, betrayed him, and it's probably, I'm probably going to say the coldest kill in the entire series, when he just throws a briefcase of money. Like, the guy's like, I'll split it with you, and the guy's hanging on the line. He's like, you weren't it, you keep it, old buddy, and he just throws that at the guy, and he falls in, and oh, it's just, you know, Dalton is just, you know, he's relentless in this film. He just stops at nothing to try and track down Sanchez, and you really, it's like, you know, I don't want this guy messing with me, and especially, you know, the look, you know, Dalton is pissed, and you know he's trying to find out. He goes back to Felix's, you know, house, and he tracks down Pam Bouvier. You know, he's quite intense in that scene, just like, you know, can you help me? And you know, the scene where like they're on the boat, and it's quite a good scene, and you know, just so many great moments from Dalton in this film. He just goes for the real dark, and you know, when he's trying to, you know, when he's trying to go into cover and become friends with Sanchez, and you know, he's just like, so what, problem solver, more of a problem eliminate. And then he starts laughing like really awkwardly. He's like, ha 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 ha. You know, he's just kind of and it's really scary. You know, he's laughing, but he doesn't mean to. And this film is just, I mean, to be honest, I'm not a big fan of License to Kill, but Dalton's performance is probably his best. And the scene where he's in the tanker truck, you know, he's like the Terminator. He is like the Terminator in like when Arnold Schwarzenegger's in the truck in the first one. He is like relentless in this film, and he'll stop at nothing. Literally, he destroys the whole drug factory. He blows up every tanker. Basically, he's a physical wreck. At the end of this film, he's a physical wreck. You know, his nose is bleeding. You know, his suit's all torn, and he just looks, you know, like you know, he looks like shit. And then, you know, he lights Sanchez on fire, and you know, Dalton, and that's the end. And you know, Dalton, I think, is criminally underrated. He really is underrated. I mean, he brought the dark human aspects of James Bond, you know, almost 25 years before Daniel Craig. Well, let's see. Yeah, almost 25 years before Daniel Craig. No, almost 20 years before Daniel Craig. And he really does, you know, play Bond as a real life person. And he really, you know, he's just so believable as this secret agent. And you know, I think he is underrated, and it's a shame that people overlook him, and it's a shame that he gets criticism, because he really was a great James Bond. He played it like the books, and for me, he is probably the most accurate to the books. And it really is a shame his film he only has 2 movies. I mean, if he did 2 more, I think I might put him over Sean Connery. But it is a real shame, because I mean, there was rights issues, and he just didn't want to return because of the script in GoldenEye, and it really is sad. But I think a great Bond and underrated. So back to you, MrTardis11.
Thanks, Jack. That was a very good segment. I enjoyed watching that. I hope that the audience did as well. So yeah, what do you guys think of Timothy Dalton as Bond, and what do you think about his films, The Living Daylights and License to Kill? The way I'd rank them, I'd put License to Kill at the bottom, then The Living Daylights. You know, pretty obvious to be honest, but hey ho. So yeah, tune in next time when we're going to be talking about Pierce Brosnan, the 5th actor to play James Bond, and he was in the 90s / early 2000s for Die Another Day. Yes. So, and that's going to be a very special one for Jack. Yeah, so thank you all for watching, and as always, I'm MrTardis11. See ya.